Now that I've got the athlete completely broken out, every single thing, every single article of clothing, every shape within his body, including the silo outside, is totally broken out into paths. So we can start setting up that folder structure just like we did with the shoes and placing all those smart objects into the base of each of those layer groups. Let's select the athlete and the two shoes and group those guys and place the mask for the silo on that layer group. Now, as you can see, the background went away. I think it's a little distracting working like this. You could, but I'm going to duplicate the base pixel layers for the athlete image and drop that behind this layer group. I'm going to name that athlete so we keep everything nice and organized. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paths in here. So that means I'm going to have probably 6, if not more, layer groups. Now, what did we start with? The shirt. So I was thinking of that in order. So we're going to keep that shirt group on top. Set a selection. Place that in. Shirt. Now that I got the shirt layer group set up, I can move right down the line. All right, so now we can start filling up these layer groups with some content. So that's the front shoe. I'm going to move that in there. That's easy. Back shoe. Move that in there. See, these are starting to snap in now because now we've got them in the layer groups. We're taking these incremental steps forward to integration. Once again, going back to following the system, if I'm trying to think about completely integrating these shoes like right in the beginning, I'm putting a lot of thought and time and attention into really focusing on finishing something before the rest of the image is finished. So you can see now, following step by step through the image sort of finishes along a very linear timeline, step by step. So it all starts to come together at the same time where nothing's really out of time, where one piece is super finished and the rest completely isn't. So stressing that, following these steps in the system again. Now, we're going to follow the same exact process we did with the shoes and duplicate our smart object up into all of these layer groups we just created. Now let's set up our Liquify guides. All right, so it's worth saying right now because you're probably looking at this and going, wow, this is starting to get crazy complex. And it is. This image is a lot more complicated than a pair of shoes. You see I'm following the same steps. It might seem excessive at this stage. I totally understand that. But just have faith in the system, follow it, and you're going to understand why I'm doing this huge amount of prep stuff for this image, because it's going to make it so much easier to work with once we dig in. So all that said, I want to go back in now and do a little demo to show you visually why I'm setting it up this way so you trust me a little bit more. So check out our setup here. This one on the bottom, I'm going to group that and call it base. And in each of these groups, I'm going to fill them with a solid color layer so you can just see visually how these all stack up. And I'm just going to pick random colors. Check it out. That's our base, right? So that's all the skin except for the arms is isolated in this group. So why aren't we seeing purple show up in any of these other places? Well, that's because I filled all these guys with pixel layers on the bottom. That's the reason I put pixel layers on the bottom of every group. So this is why I call it tiered masking, is because they're stacked on top of each other in a way that they overlap, so none of those edges are repeated. So let's check this out. I'll keep filling them up with color fill layers, different colors. Let's just move that around. Try a different color. For the tights, shorts, arms, and finally the shirt. Now, see how the shirt sits on top of the shorts, the head, and the arms. And since it's filled with pixels, or in this case, solid color fill, you can't see the areas that I've clipped out on the arms that extend beneath the shirt. Therefore, no repeated edges. So to make that 100% clear, I'm going to show you the old school way we used to do this same thing and what the problem is. Let's bring up a new group. Call it old way. And inside there I'm going to bring up two new layer groups. Top one, I'm going to put the shirt. The bottom one, I'm going to create the arms, but I'm going to knock out the shirt selection from the arms. Let's go back to seeing the athlete here. I'm going to fill these with solid colors. Just so we can see what the masks are doing. Right about there. All right, cool. So here's the mask for the shirt. Here's the mask for the arms. Do you see these repeated edges here? I'm going to zoom in, show you what happens as a result. See this line right here. So now you see in the old style of doing it how errors got introduced into the system with the butting edges, gaps, overlapping edges. They were a nightmare to fix. So Now that I've created this tiered system with pixels in the bottom of every layer group that overlap, completely eliminates any of those problems. As long as it's set up right from the beginning, we don't have to worry about errors at all in terms of edges. So let's now move on to our liquefy step using our guides to clean up edges in the athlete. I just went through and created the guides that were obvious to me, but in an image like this that's a lot more complex than just our shoe, you're gonna find yourself probably wanting to either modify or make some new guides as you're going, because you're gonna find maybe new edges that you need to manipulate that it wasn't really clear that you needed to set up a guide for that right off the bat. But just start with your basic group and adapt as you move through the image. So I'm gonna start from the bottom. Start with the base. Now you can really start to see why these naming conventions help us find where our guide layers are, because once this stacks up to tons of layers, it's really, really hard to find what you need to load in here into the backdrop. So remember, the base is pretty much the head and the legs, and I think that's pretty much it. So let's start with the tights. Make sure the opacity's up. And I'm just gonna tuck them under. And with the head, let's load the shirt. Yeah, you can really see some of that fringing now that we start to isolate things. You don't want to go too far if there's a lot of like white bounce from the shirt onto the skin. Don't worry about pushing that too far under, because we can also clean that up a little bit more later when we start to do our frequency separation cleanup. Oh, you know, the one guide that I forgot to do was the silo. Let's take a look at that. Now, I kind of choose colors to fill these guides with that aren't too saturated, aren't too dark or too light. You'll find as you work that the color and value of the guide can have an effect on how easy it is to see what's going on with the edges. So you may even need to go in and shift that a little bit in order to make it visualize better. So let's go back in and work on the base. Load that silo. Oh, did I not name that? Didn't name it. Underscores are all right. Remember, we're just working on the head and the legs. So he's getting a little outside bounce on the skin from the bright environment. That's okay. It's not a whole lot I need to do on the legs. They're looking pretty good. So we can move right up the line. And check it out, even though we've done all this work on the shoes, that doesn't mean we can't still check that out and see if we want to do a little bit more liquefying. We could start with the silo. And that looks pretty good because we really already trimmed the shoe out a little bit. But anywhere you see an edge, just give it a little bit of a nudge to clean that up. And let's do we're on the back shoe, negative space. Yeah, we can definitely improve that connection point right there. Maybe a little bit over here. Cool. On to the front shoe. You can see once you get moving, using this process and all your guides are set up, it goes pretty quick. I think right here we could push it out. All right. Tights, let's see. That line looks good. Let's throw in the arms. Remember, don't start going in here into the shorts and cleaning up because we're only working on the tights right now. So let's load the shorts. You'll be able to tuck that completely under there. Nah, it's starting to warp the mesh a little bit too much there. All right, looking good. Let's move into the shorts. Load up the shorts negative. Load up arms. Now we need the shirt. on our way. Almost done. Let's deal with the arms. We can load the arms negative space. Check the shirt edge. Yeah, so I want to preserve this little edge shadow here. I just want to make sure that none of the shirt is coming into the arm. And one way to think about that, and why we're going through all this trouble to do these edges, is that if I need to make a big change on the shirt, which I know I do, I don't want to be manipulating any of the pixels that have to do with the arm, and vice versa. If I need to change the color of the arm, like the value of the arm in a big way, you see this edge here where the shirt's bleeding in and it's getting bounced and it's kind of bright. If I need to change the color of the arm, the value of the arm dramatically, it's going to also want to shift the value of these shirt pixels that are creeping into the arm. That's where you get those edge defects, those errors from the old style of doing things that we're just totally eliminating here right up front, so you never have to worry about them. Hit OK. One last bit, and then we have the cleanest edges known to mankind. Let's load up the shirt, negative space. That shadow's okay there under the cuff, but down here is a little bit of an edge creeping in. Excellent. You know, I think on the arms I forgot to do the silo. So that's what's so nice about having Liquify as a smart filter and having all your guides, so you can always go back and tweak this. Yeah, and there's definitely a little bit of an edge there. Right. So now I've completely gone through and cleaned up every edge in the athlete. That means I'm free to focus 100% on creative exploration now. Just like you saw in the last segment, this is how I like to do things, and this is what the system does. It's by prepping everything up front, you're taking all that technical work, doing that on the front end, so later you're completely free to explore creatively and not have to worry about problems.